had grown numb to rejection long before I felt the first raindrops slide behind my collar. June in London is never what you want it to be, but that night, the darkness felt thicker than normal, and I remember matching my footsteps to the slow cadence of my own humiliation. I gripped my satchel strap tighter and glanced once more at the window of the Cordell Street Gallery. Inside, a small crowd hovered around a series of neon-lit paintings, wine glasses cradled in expert hands, chatter swelling and cresting in endless cycles. Just an hour ago, I'd arrived carrying a DVD and a hope so fragile that the slip of a doorman's glance pierced it. The gallery's creative director, Elaine, had barely looked up from her phone when I introduced myself. My name meant nothing to her, of course. I presented my film, its case slightly warped and thumb-smudged from handling. "We appreciate your passion, Jamie," she'd said before even checking her watch, "but we're curating visual art. Traditional stuff, maybe try one of the indie cinemas if you're set on this." She offered a tight, apologetic smile, and a man beside her stifled a yawn. Thin lines of mascara ran under someone's eye as laughter punctured the polite ambience. I nodded, thanked her, and stepped outside just as the skies opened and the streetlights flickered. The case in my hand felt heavier, like a verdict. I walked hoodless as the pelt of rain soaked the back of my neck. My shoes squeaked against the slick pavement, a sound I dreaded from a lifetime of night walks back to a flat that always smelled faintly of rosemary and regret. I called my mum and let it ring, but hung up before the voicemail could answer. My family knew about the film, of course, though I often wished they didn't. Every time the topic came up at the dinner table, my Uncle Jeff would plow right through his potatoes and say, "Maybe make a documentary about real life, eh? Jamie's wild goose chase." It always got a laugh, my brother Tomas liked to add, "Maybe cast Mum as the kitchen ghost," and then everyone counted that as encouragement. I had never seen them mean, just unable to believe. The idea that I, Jamie Cartwright, sixth-floor council estate, perpetually ramen broke, would ever see my name beyond the bottom scroll of a YouTube page was comedic to them. I tried not to begrudge them. Everyone's got to guard a little of their disbelief, otherwise you start to think anything's possible. That night, after trudging up 5 flights of cracked concrete stairs, I peeled the damp coat from my back, set a kettle to boil, and queued up the film on my laptop. It felt futile. This was the 7th rejection I'd received in as many weeks, and the film festivals had all sent the same kind of note. Strong voice, unconventional narrative, ultimately not a fit. My friends, at least those who still returned my calls, said to keep going. But at some point, the repetition of encouragement wadded together, soft and useless. I watched my own film play in the blue glow of the laptop. In Passing, it was called. It followed the everyday lives of 3 Londoners. An aging bus driver, a night shift nurse, and a teenage graffiti artist. Nothing sensational but honest. The pacing was slow, the music made from a borrowed viola, and the best compliment I'd received was from a neighbor who said it felt quiet but somehow brave. I took that to bed that night, letting it muffle the echo of laughter I'd left on Cordell Street. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing underneath a tangle of bedsheets. My friend Layla had messaged, "You see the link yet?" I blinked the sleep out of my eyes, scrolling up with a finger still puffy from the rain. There it was. Some small online magazine had featured In Passing in a list of 5 films you've never heard of but should watch. I clicked through, half doubting my own name would even be there, but it was, headline and all. I didn't bother forwarding it to my family. That was the first drip barely perceptible in the thunderous quiet of my failure. Weeks bled into months. I kept working at a used bookshop on Holloway Road while sending submission after submission to more festivals, online showcases, anywhere someone might press play. The flat got lonelier, but I learned to fill it with notes and scenes on paper. I would walk atop Primrose Hill when it wasn't raining, just to prove I could see further than the estate's windows. Layla invited me to screen In Passing at her tiny bar in Finsbury Park. 23 people showed up. It was mostly her friends, a few strangers, and a man who spent the latter half of the film asleep. No applause, but someone clapped me on the back and said, "Better than EastEnders." I pretended it was a compliment. Most nights I drifted in and out of dreams where someone stood at the front of a crowded cinema, pointing me out as the fraud in the back row. Still, I kept filming, new scripts, short scenes with whichever friends would try acting for a meal. All of us laughed the laughter of people without much to lose. My family's skepticism mutated into silence. No one brought up the film at Christmas. When my brother got promoted at the shipping yard, the meal paused to toast his big step up. I joined in, but towards the end my mum patted my hand and whispered, "You're still doing your little films, love." "Yeah, mum. I'm still at it." She gave me a soft, cautious smile and returned to the potatoes. Outside the house that night, walking past the battered estate courtyard, I let the silence settle deep in me. It taught me patience I'd never had before. I found I could outweigh my own sense of humiliation, endure other people's doubts as background noise. Some nights it wired my spine with bitterness, but mostly it numbed me, forced me to trade fast hope for slow resolve. Over the next year and a half, the world grew smaller, dead ends at work, blank calendars, the kind of slow-motion time that makes you question why you started anything. I chipped away at another film, this one even less commercial, as our crowdfunding page reminded me each time I checked for donations. I got to know the long trudge through a city that rarely looked up at you, and learned how to paint my frustration into stray dialogue once the camera was rolling. Then one wet December morning, a different sort of email arrived. I almost deleted it, the subject line looking like spam, seeking rights to In Passing. It turned out to be real. An independent US streaming platform had found the film through the same online magazine and wanted to feature it as part of a series on urban documentaries. It wasn't big money, but it was something. A sign. A true, undeniable step beyond the shadow of my own voice. It changed things, marginally then monumentally. In Passing started popping up on recommendation lists, word spread slowly then faster. The BBC's digital platform profiled me as part of a short Local Voices spot. Suddenly, interviews followed, scrappy online Q&As, panel invitations. Money came in small deposits, but it was enough to pay off some debts, enough to let me quit the bookshop. I bought my mum a new coat. When I delivered it, Thomas smirked and said, "Did Amazon start hiring directors now?" But my mum just hugged me. The next year was a blur, an endless patchwork of cheap train rides, rented cameras, cramped festivals. I was rarely in London proper, living out of borrowed rooms in Bristol, then Manchester, anywhere a festival accepted my work. The second film, Gutter Angels, made it to a bigger platform, accepted into the London Indie Festival, tickets actually sold in advance. I called Layla, the only person who had ever believed beyond convenience. "It's just a festival, you know," I tried, my voice shaking. "You mean the festival?" she corrected, spirited and loud in her faith. I let her belief fill spaces mine couldn't reach. When the festival rolled around, I didn't want to invite my family. I was afraid they would laugh out of reflex or worse, clap me on the back and say it was cute, and shatter whatever fragile pride I'd built up. But Layla insisted, and in a moment of borrowed courage, I sent them tickets marked "Admit to." My mum texted back a heart. Thomas, a single thumbs up. Opening night at the London Indie Festival burned itself into my memory. The air was warm, the crowds eager, and I remember thinking that every face was soft and new, not weathered by the same disbelief I had known. When the lights dimmed and my name rolled across the screen, something in my chest felt light. There were laughs in the right places, quiet in the harder moments, and when it ended, careful applause thread itself through the aisles. I spotted my mum before I heard her, a dab at her eyes with a scorched napkin. Thomas stood stiff beside her, jaw locked shut. A judge came up after, shaking my hand in that quick, certain way people do when they expect to see your name again. Some writers in the crowd asked me how long I'd known I wanted this. I thought of rain and numb fingers and nights where the only applause was the whirring of my own radiator. "Not always," I answered, "but long enough not to let it go." My Uncle Jeff called after the festival, left a voicemail voice sticky with pride he never meant to let anyone hear. "Saw you in that paper thing, Jamie. Well done. Your mum won't shut up about it, you know." Earlier that week, the city sent me a letter. Offer for a community screening sponsored by the same Cordell Street Gallery that had once turned me into background noise. They wanted to feature local directors, invite neighborhood families. The email was polite, full of the same careful, hedged compliments Elaine had used years before, only this time she called me one of our most exciting young voices. I didn't hesitate. There was no pettiness left, just this trembling, cold clarity. It was time to walk into the room again. The night of the gallery screening brought the city's old chill, the kind where dampness seeps right into your bones. I wore the same shoes I'd worn the night they turned me away, cracked at the edge but shined for defiance. My mum and Thomas came, the coat I'd bought her bright against the grey. The gallery windows glowed, shadows flickering behind thick glass. This time I was ushered in with a handshake. Elaine smiled, remembering me now. I could see the flicker of doubt as she searched for how to apologize without naming what she'd missed before. But I didn't need it. The space was full, maybe 50 people, some local, some from the art school, a handful of hard-faced aunts who'd traveled in for support. Tomas lingered by the back wall, hands cheapened by calluses, watching everything like he might shift into the shadows if anyone said the wrong thing. The main event was a showing of In Passing, but before it played, Elaine took the mic and publicly thanked Jamie Cartwright, whose work now represents a fresh and essential voice in British documentary film. The words strung for a moment in their belatedness, but I let them settle. Old wounds reach for salt, but sometimes you just need to let the air in. Then it began, my film, projected huge in a room too small to accommodate everyone's skepticism. As the opening scenes rolled, tracing a bus winding through South London, the audience fell slow and silent. I snuck a glance at Tomas, his jaw unclenched, face creasing in surprise at a scene shot not 2 blocks from the estate. About halfway through, the room shifted. People laughed softly at the old driver's jokes, sat up straighter during the nurse's round in a nearly empty ward. As the final credits arrived, there was a real pause, one of those breathing, pulsing silences where no one's quite sure what to do next. Then applause. Not polite but full, slightly uneven, impossible to mistake for anything else. I stood near the projector as the crowd thinned. The neighborhood aunts found me first, grinning, cheeks flush with pride that neither of us could quite understand. Tomas drifted up, hands shoved in his pockets. Didn't expect, he started, then shrugged, all words choked off by old habit. Was all right for a little film, yeah, I teased, voice trembling. He shook his head, eyes glassy in the track lighting. Better than all right, Jamie, better than I thought. He let himself smile, and I believed it came from a place deeper than brotherly duty. Mum found me last, arms thrown around my waist as if to anchor herself. She whispered, "You did it, love, you really did." For a moment I felt something uncurl inside me, the weight of disbelief, of every awkward joke and cautious question sliding away. In that snug gallery, the scent of cork and old carpet wrapping everything, I was entirely present. My shame had burned to patience and patience into pride. I stood by the window afterward, looking into the rain-spattered street, and saw in the glass the faces of everyone who doubted and dismissed me, alongside the truer faces. My mums, my brothers, the bus drivers in my film, the nurse's tired smile, all of us passing, struggling, arriving. London's chill pressed close as we left the gallery, but my mother's hand in mine was warm. For the first time, so was the city. I walked home through rain that felt less like washing away and more like drifting back into the place that had always, quietly, stubbornly, waited for me to return.